From the outside, Fenton Grove appeared to be the ideal suburban paradise. Perfectly trimmed hedges, gently curving roads lined with neat sidewalks, and meticulously spaced single-family homes. The glossy brochure, which I found on a local real estate website, boasted about the tranquil community atmosphere, 2 neighborhood dog parks, and the presence of a caring and conscientious homeowners association. I'm Brooke Harrison, a certified dog behaviorist and celebrity dog trainer who's been featured on national morning shows, documentary specials, and I also manage a thriving social media channel with millions of followers. My schedule was always hectic. I traveled to meet clients across the country and regularly filmed content for my fans. After years in cramped city apartments, I longed for a serene spot to call home, where my 3 rescue dogs, Lila, Scout, and Bentley, could finally enjoy running off-leash in a spacious backyard. Fenton Grove seemed like a perfect match. The listing boasted large yards, well-kept parks, and strong community engagement, the best of suburban living. The real estate agent had chirped. The moment I stepped into my new house, I felt optimistic. The setting was peaceful, the neighbors seemed polite, and the dog parks were only a short walk away. My dogs immediately loved the open space, wagging their tails in excitement at the prospect of new adventures. But on move-in day, before I could even unpack half my boxes, I encountered my first hint of trouble. A middle-aged woman, short and sharp-featured, marched up my driveway. Her real name was Marlene Abel, but many neighbors quietly referred to her by the dreaded moniker, Karen. Dressed in a pastel power suit, she carried a clipboard as if it were a scepter granting her divine authority. "Hello," she said, forcing a perfunctory smile. "Welcome to Fenton Grove. I'm the head of the Homeowners Association. We have a few guidelines to ensure the continued excellence of our neighborhood." She extended a thick stack of rules and regulations. "Please review these carefully. They cover everything from the paint colors allowed on the exterior of your house to the proper method for disposing of lawn clippings." I nodded, half amused and half taken aback. "Thanks," I replied. "I appreciate it. I'm Brooke, by the way." "Yes, I'm aware," she interrupted. "I've heard you're some kind of dog trainer." Her condescending glance made it sound like dog trainer was a nuisance, not a profession. In Fenton Grove, we have strict policies about pets in public spaces. There's zero tolerance for any dog-related disturbances. I forced a friendly tone. "Certainly. I'm always mindful of local rules, especially concerning dogs. I'm a strong advocate for responsible ownership." Karen's lips pursed like she'd already decided I was trouble. "Just make sure you keep those animals in line. We do not tolerate barking that disrupts the neighborhood." Before I could respond, she turned on her heel and marched back down the driveway, leaving me clutching the HOA binder. That was my first encounter with Karen, a meeting that left me feeling more than a little wary about my new environment. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of our conflict, and that her obsession with micromanaging the neighborhood would soon escalate beyond anything I could have imagined. Despite Karen's brusque welcome, my initial weeks in Fenton Grove were relatively pleasant. I spent most days juggling client consultations via video calls and editing new dog training tutorials for my social media channels. When the demands of work weren't pressing, I took my 3 dogs to either of the 2 community dog parks. These parks were well designed, each enclosed by tall fences to ensure safety, with separate areas for large and small breeds. Hilltop Park, nestled on a gentle slope near the eastern edge of the neighborhood. It had agility equipment, simple hurdles, a ramp, and a tunnel that dogs could explore. Pinewood Trails, a flatter, more expansive park located closer to the center of Fenton Grove, dotted with pine trees that offered shade on hot days. My dogs adored both spaces. They played fetch, ran off energy, and greeted other dogs with friendly barks and wagging tails. Many residents recognized me from television or my online channels, and we'd chat about dog behavior or training tips. It felt gratifying to share knowledge with neighbors, especially those who struggled with basic commands or puppy socialization. We would gather in friendly circles, letting our dogs romp and chase one another, forging a sense of genuine community. However, I also noticed that Karen would occasionally circle the perimeter of these dog parks in her silver SUV, glaring at anyone she suspected of wrongdoing. Once, I saw her snap photos of a man who failed to pick up after his golden retriever, though, to be fair, the man quickly cleaned the mess when reminded. Another time, she confronted a family whose Labrador barked a bit too loudly while chasing a frisbee. Her obsession with peace and quiet seemed odd, considering dog parks inevitably involve barking. Yet, I tried to keep out of her way, hoping she'd have no reason to target me. But I soon learned that minding my own business wouldn't be enough when Karen set her sights on something or someone. Whether it was the slightest barking or an off-leash dog outside designated areas, she treated every minor incident as a crime worthy of her immediate and aggressive intervention. And the day came when she found a reason to turn her focus on me. One Tuesday morning, I took Lila, Scout, and Bentley to Pinewood Trails before work. It was early, around 7:30 a.m., and the morning sun cast a gentle light across the grass. My dogs enjoyed a few minutes of spirited romping before we walked back toward the gates. That's when I spotted Karen by the entrance, arms crossed, posture rigid. She zeroed in on me the moment I approached. "Good morning," I ventured politely, but the greeting didn't soften her stern expression. "I heard you run some sort of dog business," Karen announced, her voice tense. "You're not hosting any classes here without permission, are you?" I cocked my head, puzzled. "I'm not hosting classes. I just came to exercise my dogs before starting my day." She sniffed. "I've seen all the social media chatter. People around here claim you're giving free training lessons in the park. Technically, that's considered a commercial activity on HOA property without explicit board approval." I suppressed a laugh. "Karen, I don't offer classes in dog parks without going through the proper channels. If some neighbors ask me for a tip or two, I'm happy to oblige, but I'm not running a business out here." Her eyes narrowed, as though she wasn't convinced. "I'll be keeping an eye on you. If I find you violating HOA policies by conducting unauthorized training or causing excessive noise, there will be consequences." I stifled a sigh, reminding myself to stay calm. "I'm well aware of community regulations. Thank you for your concern." With a condescending grunt, she spun around and strode off, her posture stiff. My heart beat a little faster from the tension. I'd encountered strict HOA heads before, but Karen was on another level, always monitoring, always ready to pounce. I had no clue that, within weeks, her sights would be set not just on me, but on both dog parks themselves, culminating in an audacious overreach of power that would threaten every pet-loving resident in Fenton Grove. Over the next few weeks, odd rumors began circulating throughout the neighborhood. Whispered conversations suggested Karen and a few like-minded board members considered the dog parks disruptive. Some claimed she wanted the parks shut down entirely. At first, it seemed too far-fetched. After all, the dog parks were among Fenton Grove's biggest draws, featured prominently in the HOA's own marketing materials. Why would they close one of the main community amenities? But small signs pointed to a brewing campaign. Karen started posting more frequently on the HOA's online bulletin board, complaining about noise pollution from barking dogs, careless dog owners who failed to supervise their animals, and dangerous dog behaviors that risk property damage. She insisted that quiet residents were the true majority, and that they were tired of public disturbances at all hours. Most dog owners found this rhetoric absurd. It wasn't as if the parks were open late at night. Official hours limited use to daylight hours only. And while a handful of people might fail to pick up after their dogs or let them bark too long, the majority were responsible. I caught wind of this tension every time I visited the parks. Some owners worried that Karen's complaints were building toward a major policy shift. Determined to protect the dog parks, a small group of neighbors formed a volunteer committee. They posted flyers announcing a community dog park appreciation event, hoping to highlight how beloved these spaces were. They invited me to give a brief demonstration of basic training techniques that any pet parent could practice. Grateful to them and wanting to help, I agreed to do a short presentation at Pinewood Trails. But news of this event seemed to irritate Karen further. She issued a formal statement on the official HOA website, asserting that large gatherings require official authorization and that any unauthorized use of HOA resources for an event was subject to fines. Despite not naming names, everyone in Fenton Grove knew she was pointing the finger at me and the volunteer committee. Tensions simmered to a low boil. On a bright Saturday morning, I was in my living room editing a series of dog training videos for my social channels when my phone began blowing up with texts from concerned neighbors. One read, "Have you seen the HOA bulletin board? Karen's at it again." Another exclaimed, They're shutting down Hilltop Park and Pinewood trails, maybe temporarily, maybe for good. Alarmed, I logged into the official Fenton Grove HOA portal. Sure enough, an all-caps headline leaped off the page. Temporary closure of dog parks, effective immediately. Karen, citing her role as HOA president and claiming support from the board, declared that both dog parks were under evaluation due to a surge in noise complaints, safety concerns, and maintenance issues. The statement insisted the closures were only for a brief assessment period, but did not provide a reopening date. Panic and outrage erupted on social media. Residents with large dogs lamented the loss of critical exercise space. People worried about how to keep their pets sufficiently active. Some feared they'd have to drive many miles to a public dog park outside the community, hardly convenient and entirely contradictory to one of Fenton Grove's selling points. I scrolled through furious comments on the private neighborhood forum. We pay significant HOA dues for these amenities. She can't just shut them down. My Labrador needs daily off-leash time. This is ridiculous. Who exactly complained? The parks are always busy and people are respectful. The mood was tense. Residents demanded an immediate reversal. But Karen doubled down, posting that the closure was non-negotiable and anyone found entering the dog parks would be trespassing on closed premises and subject to fines or legal action. She concluded with a bold note. My duty is to ensure a peaceful, tidy environment. Anyone interfering with that will meet swift consequences. The audacity took my breath away. An HOA's power had limits, but Karen acted like an autocrat running a fiefdom. I suspected many board members might not actually support her, but she likely manipulated or intimidated them into compliance. One thing was certain. If we, the dog owners of Fenton Grove, didn't push back, she would keep these parks closed indefinitely. Within days, the closure sign, "Dog parks temporarily closed, no trespassing," hung on the gates of both Hilltop Park and Pinewood trails. Staring at the padlocked fences, I felt a surge of indignation. My 3 dogs, used to frequent outings, now had only our yard for open playtime. The same was true for dozens of other families who relied on the dog parks. Some had small yards. Others had townhouses with no fenced yards at all. I joined forces with the volunteer committee that had been organizing the dog park appreciation event. We held an impromptu meeting in someone's garage, far from Karen's watchful gaze. Over coffee and pastries, we discussed legal avenues, potential negotiations, and public awareness strategies. Legal avenues. An HOA couldn't arbitrarily remove or close a community amenity without member approval, especially not amenities explicitly promised in marketing materials. If we dug into Fenton Grove's official documents, we might find rules specifying that major changes require a full vote by property owners. Negotiations. Some members suggested opening a dialogue with Karen, but most of us doubted she'd relent easily, given her track record of doubling down. Public awareness. A new voice rose in the conversation, mine. I explained that I had a large platform, a social media following of nearly 3 million dog enthusiasts. While I wasn't eager to drag my personal home drama into a public spotlight, we might have no choice. Raising awareness could pressure the HOA to reconsider. The group collectively agreed to attempt diplomacy first. We drafted a polite letter requesting an emergency HOA meeting. We appealed to the sense of fairness, reminding them that community dues covered park upkeep and that shutting down these spaces was a betrayal of what residents had paid for. We also gently hinted that if the closure continued, we might explore formal complaints to local authorities and even litigation. We sent the letter the next morning. Unsurprisingly, Karen responded with a terse email. Your request is denied. The parks are closed for an indefinite assessment period. All concerns should be directed to my office, though I see no cause for further discussion. M. Abel, HOA president. No reason. No mention of a timeline. Nothing. It was a flat refusal. Our group's frustration was palpable. My neighbor Linda muttered, "She's not even pretending to play fair anymore." That's when we decided to ramp up our strategy, the public campaign. I'd never used my social media presence as a weapon in a local dispute, but Karen's brazen overreach forced my hand. A few days after she refused our request for a meeting, I took to my largest platform, my video channel, and posted a 15-minute update titled, "When Your HOA Shuts Down the Dog Parks, a Trainer's Outrage." I spoke from my home office with a neutral, professional tone, carefully explaining the significance of dog parks for canine health, socialization, and mental stimulation. My new HOA's inexplicable decision to padlock both parks indefinitely. How many responsible, caring dog owners in my community were punished by an overzealous HOA president pushing a personal agenda. I didn't name Fenton Grove or Karen directly in that initial post. I simply described the situation as a case study in HOA abuse of power, appealing to the dog-loving public for advice or support. Within hours, the video racked up tens of thousands of views and generated an outpouring of sympathy and anger in the comments. "This is outrageous," one user wrote. "These people pay for that dog park. How can someone just close it?" Another chimed in, "Fight back, Brooke. You have our support." Encouraged by the response, I followed up with shorter clips on my other social platforms, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, where my combined following hovered around 3 million. The hashtags #SaveOurDogParks and #HOAOverreach took on a life of their own. People across the country began sharing stories of difficult HOAs, commiserating with the Fenton Grove residents, and demanding answers from local authorities. Some tagged local news outlets. No one in Fenton Grove expected the situation to explode on social media quite so fast. Most of my neighbors had only vaguely known that I was famous for dog training. Now, they saw the scale of my influence, and they were both stunned and grateful. Meanwhile, Karen, who clearly had no idea the wave of negative publicity she'd triggered, continued to stand firm, until the day the fiasco made headlines in local TV coverage. The local news station, Channel 7, jumped on the trending hashtag and reached out to me for a brief segment. They arrived at Fenton Grove one Saturday morning with a camera crew, intending to film the locked gates of Pinewood Trails and interview frustrated residents. I stood outside the dog park, my 3 dogs leashed beside me. A half-dozen neighbors gathered, too, clutching their own dogs or letting them hang out in strollers. Reporter Kayla Summers aimed the microphone at me. "Kayla, Brooke, you've become the face of the social media protest against this sudden dog park closure. Can you summarize what's happening here?" I explained how the parks were a vital part of our neighborhood, how we had no official explanation beyond vague noise complaints, and how the HOA president was refusing to engage in any public discussion or hold a vote among homeowners. "Kayla, have you spoken directly with this HOA president, Ms. Marlene Abel?" I nodded. "Yes. She doesn't want to negotiate. We sent multiple requests for a meeting, all denied. That's why we're here, hoping community pressure, and maybe coverage like yours, will make a difference." At that moment, as if on cue, Karen's silver SUV pulled up. She stepped out, her expression thunderous. Before Kayla could direct the camera elsewhere, Karen marched forward, pointing at the cameraman. "You're trespassing on private HOA property," she barked. "No filming is allowed without explicit permission. All of you are in violation of association guidelines." Kayla calmly responded, "Ma'am, we're filming from a public sidewalk. We have every right to be here." Karen glared at me. "So this is your doing? Exploiting the media to whip up hysteria?" "I'm protecting this community from irresponsible dog owners. Just because you happen to be some so-called celebrity doesn't mean you can break the rules." Some neighbors gasped at her hostility on live TV. My pulse quickened, but I reminded myself to remain composed. "Karen, we're just trying to have a conversation about why the parks are closed. People have a right to know." She waved her hand dismissively. "We'll reopen the parks if and when the board decides it's safe and quiet enough." This interview is over. Turning sharply, she stormed back to her SUV and sped away. The camera caught every second of her outburst. Afterward, Kayla looked back at me, eyebrows raised. "Well, that was intense." I gave a resigned shrug, trying to hide the shock that Karen had so publicly displayed her aggression and stubbornness. By that evening, clips of her meltdown ran on the local news and quickly found their way onto my social media. Public sentiment hardened even further against her. Karen's televised confrontation left her with a serious PR problem. Neighbors were livid at her combative behavior. Her meltdown only heightened demands for an immediate homeowner vote on whether the parks should remain closed. Board members were deluged with angry emails. Several privately told me they had never supported Karen's unilateral closure but felt intimidated by her tactics. One board member, Diane Liu, reached out to me discreetly. She confessed that Karen had pressured each board member individually, warning them about rampant dog-related issues and about the potential for lawsuits if a dog attacked someone. That fear-mongering approach had made them hesitate. Diane admitted that no formal vote had actually occurred. The closure was more like a strong-arm maneuver orchestrated by Karen herself. That revelation lit a fire under me. If no official vote existed, Karen's move was potentially illegal. An HOA board can't simply bypass its own bylaws. Diane whispered about calling an emergency board meeting to rectify the situation, but Karen refused to place it on the official calendar. Without the president's agreement, the board was stuck in limbo, forced to schedule informal or unofficial gatherings. Meanwhile, Karen's personal war against me intensified. She posted an open letter to the HOA website, condemning me by name. This so-called celebrity trainer is sowing chaos in our peaceful community. Her social media followers have no legal standing here, and her attempts to strong-arm the board will not succeed. We will maintain order. The dog parks will remain closed until we deem otherwise. She threatened new rules regarding how many pets a homeowner could possess, how owners must transport dogs through the neighborhood, and so on. Though I knew some of her threats had no legal backbone, the mere mention of them alarmed many residents. Tempers flared higher with each passing day. The park stayed locked, families grew desperate for a solution, and Karen's vendetta seemed unstoppable until a twist emerged from my social media sphere that neither of us anticipated. As my online posts about the closure continued to go viral, I started receiving messages from people outside the community, attorneys, legal activists, and rescue organizations who championed dog-friendly spaces. One private message came from an attorney named Julia Mendez, a pro bono specialist in HOA-related disputes. She offered her services to examine Fenton Grove's bylaws and covenants to see if Karen had acted illegally. With the blessing of our volunteer committee, I handed Julia everything we had: the HOA's publicly available articles of incorporation, the rules and regulations, the evidence of the dog parks being a promised amenity from the original development plan. Within a week, Julia returned with a startling discovery. The dog parks weren't just optional perks. They were covenanted amenities explicitly funded by homeowner dues. Any material change to these parks, such as long-term closure, required a supermajority vote of the community. Karen's unilateral action could be deemed a breach of fiduciary duty to the residents. Julia believed we could file an injunction to force the HOA to reopen the parks. Furthermore, we might have grounds for a civil suit for damages if the closure continued and caused financial harm, e.g., owners paying for outside dog park memberships, missed property value, etc. We were elated by this legal leverage. Diane Liu and a few other board members privately cheered, telling me they'd love to see the matter resolved in court if Karen refused to budge. The group reconvened in that same neighbor's garage, with Julia attending via video conference. We planned our next move: a final letter delivered to Karen and the board detailing the legal violations, a formal demand for an immediate homeowner vote about the parks, a 72-hour notice that if the HOA didn't respond, we'd file for an injunction. The decision was unanimous. We couldn't wait any longer for Karen to see reason. If she rejected these demands, we'd let the courts weigh in. And given the media attention, it was likely a judge would fast-track proceedings to address the controversy. We sent the letter via certified mail, email, and even posted a copy on the HOA's public forum. Then we waited, bracing for the storm. While we prepared our legal strategy, Karen was concocting her own bold plan, though at the time, we had no idea how far she intended to go. Later, some neighbors told me they spotted her rummaging through the dog parks late at night with a flashlight. A few nights in a row, she was seen hauling boxes in and out of the park sheds. Initially, no one knew what she was doing. Then, a rumor surfaced that she intended to demolish certain features inside Hilltop Park, possibly removing the agility course or adding unsightly structures to justify permanent closure. It sounded extreme, but after everything we'd witnessed, it wasn't unimaginable. If the parks were made unsafe or unappealing, perhaps she could claim the spaces were no longer suitable for dog usage, thereby forcing a neighborhood re-vote about whether to even keep them. Diane Liu covertly confronted Karen at a board member's house, demanding to know if she was destroying the park equipment. Karen dismissed Diane's questions with typical arrogance, proclaiming she had the authority to maintain or modify the property as she saw fit. This only deepened suspicions. Meanwhile, we waited out our 72-hour notice. 48 hours went by with no official reply from Karen or the HOA board. On the third day, still no response. Julia Mendez promptly filed the injunction paperwork with the local court. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. We felt a surge of relief. Finally, a real chance to forcibly reopen the parks. But Karen never intended to attend that hearing quietly. She wanted to force the issue before the judge could even intervene. Which is why, on the night before the scheduled court date, chaos struck at Hilltop Park. It was past midnight when my phone rang. A panicked neighbor, out walking her restless pup, saw flickering lights coming from Hilltop Park. She snuck closer and realized there were sparks near the electrical panel that powered the park's lights and sprinklers. Alarmed, she immediately called me, assuming the worst, that Karen was doing something to sabotage the park before the hearing. I threw on a jacket, hopped in my car, and drove to Hilltop Park in a matter of minutes. The tall iron gate, ordinarily padlocked, now stood open. The interior lights flickered ominously, revealing tools strewn on the grass. Sure enough, the large control box near the corner of the fenced area had its front panel ripped open, wires protruding in a tangle. Some were scorched and still smoking. Whoever had been tampering with them clearly caused an electrical short. My heart pounded. Was Karen here? Or had she left in a hurry? I gingerly stepped forward, phone flashlight in hand, scanning the area. Then I heard someone grunt, and out of the shadows emerged none other than Karen herself, looking frantic and disheveled. She clutched a set of wire cutters and a small crowbar. Her usually immaculate hair was windblown, and her pastel jacket had grime on it. "What are you doing?" I breathed. She gave a startled yelp, dropping the crowbar. "Stay back. I'm just performing maintenance." Her voice trembled with poorly concealed anger and fear. "Maintenance? With wire cutters at midnight?" I retorted. "There's a court hearing tomorrow about reopening the parks. You're trying to sabotage them so no one can use them, aren't you?" Karen's eyes blazed. "These dog parks have become an obsession for troublemakers like you, Brooke. You have no idea the stress and liability they pose to this community. I'm the only one protecting Fenton Grove from chaos." Lightning crackled across the sky, or maybe it was just the final sparks from the shorted electrical box. My phone was already in my hand, the camera app open. "I'm filming this," I warned. "You're vandalizing HOA property, and you've effectively turned off the park's security system. That's a serious offense." She lunged forward as if to snatch my phone, but I jumped back, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Give me that phone," she hissed. "I won't let you twist the truth again." I dashed toward the exit gate, calling out, "You need to leave before someone calls the cops. This is criminal behavior." Karen, panting and cornered by her own actions, she hurled insults at me but didn't follow. I half expected her to chase me, but maybe she realized how bad her situation already looked. Within minutes, I was back in my car, calling 911 to report trespassing, vandalism, and potential property damage at Hilltop Park. The operator's steady voice assured me the authorities would be dispatched immediately. By dawn, the local police had documented the scene. Karen was no longer there when they arrived, but my video footage and the neighbor's eyewitness account painted a damning picture. The court hearing scheduled for that day suddenly evolved from an injunction request to a full-blown legal showdown about Karen's alleged criminal mischief. We arrived at the county courthouse early. Word had spread, so the small hearing room was packed with anxious residents, local reporters, and even a few dog lovers from beyond Fenton Grove. A tense hush fell over the room when Karen entered, flanked by a pale-faced attorney. She refused to meet anyone's gaze. Judge Harris, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, opened the session. She wasted no time. She asked Julia Mendez to outline the basis for our injunction demand. The dog parks were covenant amenities, closed without a legitimate vote, and we sought an immediate reopening order. She questioned Karen's attorney about the board's justification for closure. The attorney mumbled about safety concerns and maintenance needs, providing no concrete evidence. Lastly, the judge raised the matter of the vandalism incident, the police report, my filmed footage, and the suspicious circumstances. She demanded an explanation. Karen's attorney looked rattled, but tried to argue that Karen was conducting late-night maintenance to fix an electrical issue that threatened to start a fire. The notion was laughable. The judge listened, unimpressed. Then came the highlight of the hearing. I submitted my phone video, which had captured Karen cutting wires in an otherwise undamaged control box. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Even from across the room, you could sense her disapproval of Karen's reckless actions. "This is extremely troubling," Judge Harris said, tone icy. "I see no legitimate reason for tampering with the control box at midnight without prior notice to the community or professional assistance. This suggests malicious intent to render the park inoperable." Karen fidgeted in her seat, color draining from her cheeks. Meanwhile, the judge demanded clarity on the board's involvement. Diane Liu stood up, nervous but resolute, and confirmed that no official vote had ever occurred to authorize the closure. She admitted Karen had pushed the closure single-handedly, ignoring the proper procedural requirements. Gasps rippled through the crowd. With that revelation, Judge Harris delivered her decision. Immediate reopening of both Hilltop Park and Pinewood Trails, pending a full membership vote if the HOA truly desired to close or modify them. Restraining order against Karen from taking any unilateral actions affecting community property without documented board approval. The judge also referred the vandalism case to the district attorney, citing potential felony charges for criminal damage to communal property. The room buzzed with relief and amazement. The dog parks were ours again. But it wasn't over for Karen. Her legal troubles had just begun. Within hours of the hearing, the padlocks on Pinewood Trails and Hilltop Park were removed. Volunteers worked quickly to restore the electrical systems Karen had sabotaged. The local news captured triumphant footage of happy dogs racing across the grass that same afternoon. My social media channels lit up with congratulatory messages. #SaveOurDogParks morphed into #DogParksReborn, and we trended once again with thousands of celebratory posts. Neighbors who had been at odds suddenly banded together, grateful for the outcome. The volunteer committee expanded into a permanent advocacy group to ensure that no future HOA president could unilaterally close our beloved parks. We even organized a festive dog park reopening party, featuring dog-friendly activities, raffle prizes, and a small booth where I offered free training tips to any resident who wanted them. It was heartwarming to see so much unity, so much gratitude. But overhead loomed darker news. The local district attorney's office was investigating Karen's nighttime vandalism, armed with video evidence and a police report. Word spread that the charges could be serious, since she had not only caused property damage but also risked an electrical fire in a communal space. Moreover, she'd effectively lied to the board and to the public, undermining the HOA's bylaws. Karen herself vanished from public view for several days. Rumors flew. Some claimed she was holed up in her house, ignoring door knocks, letting mail pile up. Others speculated she might flee the city entirely to avoid criminal charges. But soon enough, the authorities brought the matter to a head, placing her under formal arrest just a week after the hearing. It happened on a warm Friday morning. Patrol cars rolled into Fenton Grove, their lights reflecting off manicured lawns. A small cluster of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk as officers approached Karen's front door. She refused to open at first. Then, after several tense minutes, the door swung wide, revealing Karen in a rumpled robe, defiance in her eyes. Two officers read out the charges: felony vandalism, reckless endangerment, and misuse of HOA authority, a local statute that specifically punishes individuals who intentionally misuse communal power or funds. Karen's face blanched. She muttered protests about bias and false accusations, but the presence of video footage and multiple witnesses left little room for her to bluff. They led her away in handcuffs, quietly, with no fanfare beyond the startled gasps of onlooking neighbors and the whir of a camera phone capturing the scene. A hush fell over the block once she was placed in the squad car. People whispered to one another, sharing a collective sense of disbelief. It was one thing to suspect Karen would be punished, but seeing her physically arrested made the reality all the more striking. Later that day, I scrolled through social media. Videos of Karen's arrest had already popped up, fueling a fresh wave of commentary. Some netizens were gleeful, others sympathetic. But the overall consensus was that her extreme actions, closing dog parks, vandalizing equipment, threatening neighbors, had led her down this path. Karen was arraigned on multiple charges, and the judge set trial dates. The evidence stacked against her was overwhelming. Besides the vandalism, additional financial records emerged. Karen had allegedly diverted a portion of HOA funds to pay for private security patrols near her home during the closure, all without board approval. The HOA's finances were in disarray. Shocked residents demanded an audit, suspecting she might have used communal funds for other unauthorized expenses. When the day of final sentencing arrived, following Karen's guilty plea to avoid a longer trial, an entire row of Fenton Grove neighbors attended. Some brought their dogs, waiting outside the courthouse to show solidarity. I watched from the gallery with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Despite her harsh behavior, it was still sad to see a person's life unravel so spectacularly. The judge, referencing Karen's history of intimidation, property damage, and misuse of HOA money, had harsh words. "Ms. Abel, you exploited your position to deprive residents of rightful amenities, misappropriated community funds, and performed reckless acts that endangered public safety. This court deems your actions inexcusable." Her sentence included a prison term of 3 years for felony vandalism and reckless endangerment, massive restitution to the HOA for the damaged electrical system, the padlocks, and the unauthorized security patrols, forfeiture of property. To cover the financial restitution, her house in Fenton Grove would be seized and placed on the market, the proceeds going directly toward reimbursing the association's losses and legal fees. Karen's eyes brimmed with tears. The once imperious HOA president was now a convicted felon, stripped of her status and her home. She was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her shoulders sagging. No grand speech, no final act of defiance, just the cold truth of consequences finally catching up with her. With Karen gone, the HOA board reorganized. Diane Liu and several other community-minded residents stepped up to fill the leadership vacuum. They passed new bylaw amendments that required transparent procedures for any major changes to neighborhood amenities. Importantly, these amendments made it impossible for any single individual, president or otherwise, to unilaterally shut down community resources without a homeowner vote. The dog parks thrived in the months after Karen's downfall. Volunteers donated funds to upgrade Hilltop Park's agility course, replant sod at Pinewood Trails, and even install solar-powered lighting for extended evening hours, within noise limits, of course. The atmosphere felt celebratory, like we had reclaimed not just the parks, but the spirit of unity that had once attracted us all to Fenton Grove. For my part, I continued my daily dog training sessions in the freshly reopened parks, filming new content that highlighted how neighborhood communities could come together to solve problems. My HOA saga updates on social media reached millions, inspiring dog owners across the country to stand up against unfair or irrational homeowners' regulations. The final chapter of the story, featuring Karen's sentencing, garnered massive attention. Some viewers saw it as a cautionary tale about the perils of petty tyranny. Others simply rejoiced that justice had prevailed. On a sunny afternoon a few weeks after the sentencing, I sat on a bench at Pinewood Trails, watching Lila, Scout, and Bentley chase each other in circles. A pair of neighbors introduced me to their new rescue puppy, asking for advice on crate training. We laughed, swapped dog stories, and reveled in the simple joy of a public park for pets. All around us, people relaxed and chatted, free of the tension that once hovered like a dark cloud. In that moment, I felt a sense of deep contentment. We had faced adversity, confronted an overbearing HOA official, and emerged stronger as a community. No longer overshadowed by Karen's arrogance, Fenton Grove was truly living up to its brochure promise, a warm, welcoming environment where neighbors and their dogs can thrive.